Out of all the newspaper comic strips, I think it's safe to say the Peanuts series has some of the most recognizable characters. And in today's video, we're going to take a look back at the history and evolution of one of, if not the most famous character from the Peanuts series. And the character that Charles Schulz, the creator of the Peanuts series, said himself had the most design changes out of all his characters. And that character is Snoopy. And if you're going to talk about Snoopy, you gotta talk about Woodstock as well. You can't have one without the other. But before we begin, it would be greatly appreciated if you would leave a like and a subscription if you enjoyed this content. And with that now out of the way, let's begin. On October 2nd, 1952, the Peanuts comic strip made its debut. And only 2 days after this, on October 4th of the same year, Snoopy had his grand first appearance, and he looked like this. As you can see, he looked like a regular dog, a beagle to be more specific. And on November 10th of the same year, Snoopy got his name of Snoopy. And the character of Snoopy was based off of Charles Schulz's childhood dog named Spike, who was adopted in 1927. And the dog's antics were what inspired Snoopy's antics. Snoopy's name was originally intended to be Sniffy, but due to another comic series at the time having a dog named Sniffy, Charles Schulz had to come up with another name for the dog, and ended up settling on the name Snoopy. And this name actually came from his mother, who suggested that if the family were to ever get another dog, they should name him Snoopy. Looking back over at Snoopy in the comics, on May 27th, 1952, Snoopy thought his first phrase, and right off the bat, Snoopy is portrayed as being intelligent. I mean, come on, only someone with great intelligence is using the word indignities. On January 9th, 1956, 6 years after Snoopy's debut, Snoopy was seen upright on his hind legs for the first time. And look at him. The swag is unmatched. And while Snoopy would eventually appear exclusively upright, for several more years he would remain using all four legs, with a scene of him upright occasionally appearing in the comic strips. And on June 28, 1957, Snoopy was seen walking upright for the first time. And as you can see by this point, his design changed a bit. In 1959, the Peanuts characters made their first appearance on television, in the form of animated commercials which were produced by Bill Melendez. And this guy also produced pretty much all of the animated Peanuts specials, and was the original voice actor for Snoopy. And since most of the main Peanuts cast appeared in these adverts, including Snoopy, this marks Snoopy's first television appearance. Now take a look at this footage and make a guess as to what you think the Peanuts characters are advertising. Alright, made your guess? Well, whatever you said is wrong. They were used to advertise Ford products. Yeah, the vehicle manufacturer.
Charlie Brown and his friend.
Why, thank you, Charlie Brown. Thank you, Charlie Brown.
What's the occasion? Has Charlie Brown had another baby sister?
No, Ford has new economy twins, so he's passing out chocolate cigars to everyone.
Everyone?
Yes, everyone.
And the Peanuts characters appeared in television commercials and printed adverts for Ford up until the mid-60s. And in the 60s, his design changed once again to make him look like this. This design gave Snoopy a longer neck and a fatter snout. Also by this point in the 60s, he appeared pretty much exclusively standing and walking upright. Later in the 60s, he once again got a few design differences. And at this point, he looks pretty much like he does nowadays. The biggest change in this design was that he's now a little more plump. Also in the 60s, specifically October 10th, 1965, Snoopy's alter ego as the World War I flying ace made its first appearance. And as you've seen so far, the 60s were a fairly important decade in the history of Snoopy. And we're not even done yet, because in 1966, Woodstock was introduced. Well, actually, in the beginning he was just an unnamed bird, but he would eventually be referred to as Woodstock. In the comic strip, Woodstock's story begins when this mother bird lands on Snoopy, who is lying on his doghouse. Then the mother bird proceeds to build a nest on Snoopy, and in the following comics, 2 birds would hatch from the nest, and after several comics of the birds struggling to fly, they would eventually fly off and wouldn't be seen again. Until the following year in 1967, when one of the birds would return to his birthplace, and this bird would become Woodstock. And after his return, Woodstock would, over time, become sort of a sidekick to Snoopy. And at this point, he was still unnamed, but on June 22nd, 1970, he would get the name Woodstock. based off the music festival of the same name. Looking back at Snoopy and the Peanuts comic series as a whole, the 60s are considered the golden age of the series. It was also the decade where Snoopy got his main rise in popularity. It was also in the 60s where Snoopy made his first appearance in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. His balloon depicted him as his World War I flying ace alter ego, and since his debut in the parade, a Snoopy balloon has made an appearance in just about every Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade since then. I bring this up because it's a prime example of how Snoopy's popularity has maintained through the years. Now looking back at the animated appearances of Snoopy, on December 5th, 1965, the first made-for-TV Peanuts special aired, titled A Charlie Brown Christmas. And this was the first animated appearance of the Peanuts characters outside of advertisements. And while Snoopy did appear, Woodstock did not appear, because at this point in 1965, Woodstock hadn't even been created yet. And after the success of A Charlie Brown Christmas, many Peanuts animated specials were created, and on October 29th, 1972, the 10th animated Peanuts special aired, titled You're Not Elected, Charlie Brown. Bit of an odd name. Anyways, this special marked the first animated appearance of Woodstock. And in this first appearance, Woodstock was voiced by Bill Melendez. Yeah, the same guy that originally voiced Snoopy. By this point in the 70s, Snoopy and Woodstock's designs had been pretty much solidified, and they both continued to be main characters in the comic strips, which ended production in 2000, after the death of its creator, Charles Schulz. And while the original comic strip did come to an end, the animated Peanuts productions did not. And the most notable production after the ending of the original comic strip was in 2015, with the release of the first 3D animated Peanuts film, titled The Peanuts Movie. Very creative. And this was the first time the Peanuts characters appeared in 3D. And yes, of course, that included both Snoopy and Woodstock, who in this movie were still voiced by Bill Melendez, because although he passed away in 2008, the film used some archived recordings of him voicing the characters. And since 2015, the Peanuts characters have continued to appear in animated form, whether that be 2D or 3D. And one thing I didn't discuss in this video was the history of Snoopy and Woodstock in merchandising. But just so you know, there is an absurd amount of merchandise for both characters. And even if one day the Peanuts characters stop appearing in animated form, but let's be real, that will almost certainly never happen, they will still live on in all the abundance of merchandise. And that was the history and evolution of Snoopy and Woodstock. Definitely some of the most iconic comic characters of all time. And if you enjoyed this video, a like, subscription, and maybe even a comment would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to watch some of my other videos, I'll have a few linked in the description. Or you could just click on my channel and pick any video you want. And with that, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.